Not every separation happens due to a lack of love. Sometimes the love is still there, but it starts losing ground, to exhaustion, to comparison, to the constant feeling that life could be better, easier, more comfortable. And when that happens, decisions start to change. They stop being based on what one feels, and start being based on what is missing. This is Sarah's story, a woman who reached a point where everything seemed insufficient, and who, without realizing it, began to measure the value of her own life by what she didn't have. Sarah and Michael had been together for almost 8 years. In the beginning, everything was simple: a small apartment, little money, but a light routine. They laughed at small things. They shared plans. They spoke about the future as if everything were possible. And for a long time, that was enough. But time passed. And with it came the demands. The bills started to get tight. The plans started to delay. And life stopped being light. Michael worked a lot. He left early. He came back late. Always tired. But even so, the money never seemed like enough. And that's when something changed inside Sarah. At first, it was just a passing thought. Then, it turned into comparison. Friends traveling, perfect posts, couples living a reality that she began to desire. And little by little, that started to bother her. Until it stopped being just a bother. It turned into frustration. And without realizing it, Sarah began to believe in something dangerous, that the problem with her life was Michael. And it was exactly at that moment that the decision began to form. A decision that seemed logical, fair, and even necessary, but one that, in truth, she wasn't ready to understand yet. That morning, everything seemed normal. The silence of the house, the usual routine, the smell of coffee coming from the kitchen. But inside, Sarah was no longer there. She was distant, thinking, repeating the same thoughts from the night before, comparing, calculating, convincing herself that this was for the best. Because when a decision starts to form, the mind finds ways to justify it. Michael was in the kitchen, like every day, preparing coffee before leaving for work, a simple gesture, repeated, almost automatic, but one that, on that day, seemed invisible to Sarah. She leaned against the wall for a few seconds, watching, without saying anything, as if she were seeing that scene for the last time. And in a way, she was. "We need to talk," she said finally. Her voice came out firm, firmer than she herself expected. Michael looked at her. Right away, he noticed something was different. It wasn't just another conversation. It wasn't another complaint. It was something else. "What is it?" he asked. Sarah took a deep breath. For a second she hesitated, but she quickly pushed away any doubt. "I want a divorce." The silence that followed was heavy, different, as if time had stopped inside the kitchen. Michael didn't react right away. He stood still, trying to understand, as if those words didn't make sense. "What do you mean?" he asked, still confused. Sarah looked away. "I can't take this life anymore." The sentence came out direct, without softening it, without trying to sugarcoat it. "I want more. I deserve more." Michael felt it. But he didn't respond with anger. He didn't raise his voice. "We can improve," he said. "I can try harder. We'll find a way." But Sarah was no longer at that point. "It's not about trying harder." She paused and added, "It's about not wanting this anymore." And at that moment, the decision stopped being a thought. It became reality. After that sentence, silence took over the kitchen. But it wasn't an ordinary silence. It was heavy, full of things that hadn't been said, and perhaps never would be. Sarah expected a reaction, an argument, a plea, some kind of resistance. Anything that would confirm that the decision was hard for both of them, but that's not what happened. Michael just stayed in silence, looking at her, processing. And gradually, Something changed in his expression. It wasn't anger. It wasn't despair. It was something else. Something more contained. Quieter. "If that's what you want," he said, after a few seconds. His voice came out calm, controlled, and it was exactly that which unsettled Sarah. Because she didn't expect it to be easy. She expected conflict, but she didn't find it. And for an instant, that was bothersome. "I've thought about it a lot," she replied quickly. "It's what's best for me." Michael nodded slightly, as if accepting it. But there was something strange in that gesture. Something Sarah couldn't identify at the time. He didn't ask any more questions. He didn't try to change the decision. He just turned his back and left the kitchen. That wasn't in the script. Sarah stood still, feeling a slight discomfort grow, because, for the first time, she wasn't in control of the situation. Minutes later, Michael returned, with a small box in his hands. Simple, old, but carefully kept. He placed the box on the table, slowly, without rush. "What is this?" Sarah asked, frowning. Michael didn't answer immediately. He just opened the box, and what was inside made time slow down. Photos, old tickets, small objects, details that, to anyone else, wouldn't mean anything. But to them, they meant everything. "I was keeping this," he said calmly. Sarah felt something strange in her chest, but she still tried to ignore it. Because at that moment, she still believed she was right. But that box was about to prove the opposite. Sarah looked inside the box and went silent. For an instant, everything else lost importance. Inside, there was no money. There was no luxury. There was nothing she had been saying she needed. But there was something she didn't expect to feel at that moment. Memory. She picked up the first photo, the two of them smiling. A simple place, a cheap trip, but the two of them seemed happy. Truly. She slightly narrowed her eyes, as if that image no longer matched what she believed. Michael watched in silence, without interrupting, without pressure. "Remember this?" he asked calmly. Sarah didn't answer, but she remembered. And that was the problem. She picked up another item, an old ticket, a small concert, nothing grand. But at the time, it had been special, because they were together. And at that moment, something started to truly bother her. It wasn't guilt yet. It was discomfort, because those memories didn't match the speech she had been repeating, that none of it had been enough. "I kept all of this," Michael said, "because I thought it still had value." The sentence was simple, but it hit directly. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "Michael," but he continued, "I just wanted to understand when this stopped being enough for you." The silence that followed was different, heavier, harder, because for the first time, Sarah didn't have a ready answer. It wasn't all at once. There wasn't one exact moment. It was bit by bit, day after day, comparison after comparison, until, without noticing, she began to see all of that as not enough, even though it had been everything. She closed the box slowly, but the weight of it was already inside her, and for the first time since she made the decision, a doubt appeared. Small, silent, but dangerous, and she didn't know it yet. But that doubt was about to grow much faster than she imagined. Sarah kept her hands on the box for a few seconds, as if it were just an ordinary object. But it wasn't. Inside was a version of her that no longer existed, and that started to bother her more than any argument could. Michael remained standing on the other side of the table, calm, but distant, like someone who had already understood something before her. "When did this stop being enough?" he repeated, lower. The question wasn't aggressive. It wasn't an accusation. It was worse. It was sincere. and for that reason, impossible to ignore. Sarah opened her mouth to answer, but no words came, because any answer she gave wouldn't be complete. It wasn't a specific day. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a grave mistake. It was something much more silent. She started to compare their life with others, compare achievements, compare comfort. And gradually, what before seemed enough started to seem like little. But saying that out loud made everything even emptier. "Things change," she said finally, trying to remain firm. "I changed." Michael nodded slightly, without arguing, without trying to prove otherwise. "I changed too," he replied. And that answer brought something unexpected. Fear. Because there was no longer an attempt there. There was no more effort. Only acceptance. And it was exactly that which shook Sarah. Because deep down, she expected resistance. She expected him to fight, to insist, to show that it was still worth it. But Michael did none of that. He just accepted it. And at that moment, for the first time, Sarah started to feel that maybe she had gone too far. But it wasn't regret yet. Not yet. It was just a growing discomfort, a strange weight in her chest that she still insisted on ignoring, unaware that she was only minutes away from understanding the scale of the mistake she had just made. Michael closed the box with care, as if he were ending something that could no longer be reopened. The sound of the lid snapping shut was low, but to Sarah, it seemed too loud, final. He pushed the box slowly toward her. "Keep this," he said calmly. "Maybe one day you'll understand the value this has." There was no weight in his voice, but there was weight in the silence that followed. Sarah felt something tighten in her chest, stronger now, harder to ignore. "Michael." She tried to say something, but he was already a few steps back, picking up the keys from the table. No rush, no nervousness, without any attempt to prolong that moment, and that made no sense. "Aren't you going to say anything else?" Sarah asked, with a slight tone of urgency. Michael stopped for a second, but he didn't turn around completely. "I've said everything I needed to," he replied. That hit harder than any argument, because there was no exaggerated emotion, there was no drama, only an end. He walked toward the door. Each step seemed too slow, too heavy, and for the first time, Sarah felt something different from what she had been feeling until then. It wasn't frustration. It wasn't anger. It was insecurity. "Aren't you even going to try to stop me?" she asked. The question came out lower, almost without strength. Michael stopped. This time he stayed silent for a few seconds, and then he replied, "I can't convince someone to stay when she has already decided to leave. Simple, direct, irreversible." And in that instant, something inside Sarah started to break, because that wasn't the reaction she expected. She wanted to feel that she was still important, that there was still something to be saved. But what she found was someone who had already accepted losing, and that weighed more than any lack of money. Michael opened the door and left, without looking back, and it was exactly at that moment that everything started to crumble. The door closed, and the sound echoed through the whole house. It wasn't loud, but it felt definitive. Sarah stood still, without moving, eyes fixed on the door, as if at any moment he would come back. But he didn't come back. And in that instant, silence took over everything. A different silence, heavy, uncomfortable. The house was the same. The furniture was in the same place. Nothing had changed. But at the same time, everything was different. The coffee was still on the table, just as Michael had prepared it, like he did every day. Hot, ready, waiting. But now, meaningless. Sarah walked slowly to the table, She looked at the cup, and for some reason, that hurt. More than it should have. Because that gesture was simple, but constant. It was care. It was presence. It was something that was always there, and that she had never stopped to value. She pulled out the chair, sat down slowly, and looked around. The silence seemed louder now, almost suffocating, and it was at that moment that the first real sensation appeared. It wasn't doubt anymore. It was emptiness, a strange emptiness, sudden, as if something had been torn away, all at once. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. It was the best decision, she whispered to herself. But her own voice didn't convince her. She got up, walked through the house, looked at the details, the objects, the small things that before went unnoticed, and everything seemed to carry some memory, some moment, some story. And gradually, that started to weigh, because for the first time, she was no longer looking at what was missing. She was looking at what she had lost. And the feeling was immediate and strong and impossible to ignore. But there was something worse coming, because regret doesn't arrive slowly. It arrives when the truth sinks in. And for Sarah, that moment was very near. Sarah went back to the table. The box was still there, open, as if it were waiting for her. And this time, she didn't try to ignore it. She sat down again, more slowly, as if she already knew that something inside her was about to change. She picked up another photo, the two of them on the sofa, laughing at something that couldn't even be understood from the image. But you could feel it. It was light. It was real. And for the first time, that truly hurt. Because it wasn't just a memory, it was a comparison between who she was and who she had become. She ran her fingers over the photo, as if she could go back to that moment. But she couldn't. And that started to tighten. Hard. She picked up her phone, almost on impulse. She opened social media. The same images as always. Trips, smiling couples, apparently perfect lives. But this time, something was different. That didn't seem inspiring anymore. It seemed empty, superficial, distant. Because now, she had something to compare it to. Not with others, but with herself. With what she had lived. With what she had just let go. She locked the screen. Her heart started to race. A strong discomfort rose through her chest. And suddenly, it all made sense. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the simple life. It wasn't Michael. It was the way she started to see everything. She stood up quickly, her breathing heavier, her gaze lost. "What have I done?" she whispered. And in that instant, regret came. All at once. Without warning, without softening. Heavy, real, irreversible. She ran to the door, opened it, looked outside, her heart racing, hoping to see him there, somewhere. But there was no one. The street was empty, silent, and in that moment, Sarah understood something that no one had told her. Some decisions showed the mistake on the same day, and she didn't know it yet. But maybe it was already too late. Sarah left the house almost without thinking, her heart racing, her breathing uneven, as if, somehow, there was still time, as if she could fix everything with a simple conversation. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking. She called Michael. Once, nothing. Called again. Ringing. But he didn't answer. The silence on the other end of the line was worse than any answer. She started walking faster, aimlessly, looking around as if he could appear at any moment. "Answer, please," she whispered. She called once more and again, but nothing. Anxiety started to grow. It turned into despair, because, until a few minutes ago, she had control. It was she who decided. It was she who ended it. But now, everything had changed. Now she was the one chasing, the one who needed him, the one who wanted to go back. And that hurt. She stopped in the middle of the street, taking a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts, but she couldn't, because the more she thought, the more she understood. It wasn't about money. It never was. It was about everything he did, without needing to say it. It was about presence, care, constancy. And she traded all of that for an idea, for an expectation, for something that wasn't even real. The tears started to fall, uncontrollably. "I need to talk to him," she said in a low voice. But deep down, she already felt it. Something had changed, something definitive. Because when someone accepts losing, it's not at that moment that it ends. It ended before. And for the first time, Sarah realized maybe she wasn't trying to save the relationship. Maybe she was trying to save her own conscience. But there was a problem, and it was impossible to ignore. Not everyone waits. Not everyone comes back. And sometimes, when you decide to return, the other person has already learned to move on. Sarah went back home slowly, without the rush from before, without the hope of finding Michael at the door. The silence was still there, but now it seemed even heavier. She went in, closed the door, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of the decision. Everything was exactly as before, but nothing was the same. The box was still on the table, open, waiting, like a constant reminder. She approached, sat down, and just stared, without touching, as if that was all that was left. And in a way, it was. The phone was still in her hand. No answer. No callback. No sign of him. And at that moment, she understood something she had never considered. Michael didn't just leave the house. He left the position of the one who insisted, the one who tried, the one who fought alone. And when that changes, there is no going back to how it was before. The tears came again. Quieter now, deeper, because it wasn't despair anymore. It was awareness. She picked up one of the photos, the same one from the beginning, the two of them smiling, knowing nothing, not imagining where they would end up. "I threw it away," she whispered. The phrase came out low, but loaded with truth, because on that day, she didn't lose for a lack of love. She lost for not recognizing the value while she still had it. And that is the kind of mistake that you can't fix on the same day, nor the following week. Sometimes, not in a whole lifetime. The phone remained silent. The house remained empty. And Sarah stayed there, with everything she always had, now transformed into memory. Because some choices teach quickly, but they charge dearly. And on that day, she learned in the hardest way possible, not everything that seems like little is really little. Sometimes, it's everything. And when you realize that, it's no longer there. And in the end, maybe this story isn't just about Sarah. Maybe it's a warning. How many times do we start to value more what we see in others than what we've built with someone? How many times does "it's not enough" appear, even when love, care, and presence exist? Because the truth is simple and harsh. We don't always lose for a lack of love. Sometimes, we lose for not recognizing the value in time. And when we realize it, it's already too late. If this story made you reflect, if at some point you saw yourself in it, take advantage of it now. Value it while it still exists. Talk while there's still time. And don't wait to lose, to understand. And if you like stories like this, stories that make you think, feel, and see life in a different way, subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and share this video with someone who needs to hear this today. Because sometimes, a story can change a decision, and a decision can change everything. See you in the next video.